Alright, so I did a PTR patch notes discussion thing yesterday, and well, they updated it again today. So we have a newer, updated version to look over now. And yeah, I'll just kind of dive into it. Updated December 16th. So it looks like they're really pushing for people to use altar heroes more rather than tavern heroes with this change here. So 25 gold reduction. I personally don't like them being different gold costs like this. You know, maybe I don't know. Maybe they could have had build time be quicker. But it is one way to push altar heroes more. But it also can be looked at as a sort of nerf to races that buy a lot of tavern heroes, which would be mostly elf. Orc tends to play altar heroes to begin with, so this is generally a buff to orc. Human sometimes mixes tavern heroes with like a naga or a panda, but oftentimes they can just go Mountain King or Blood Mage. So yeah, this affects elf the most, but it does affect Dark Ranger for undead, and it affects you know, panda for orc and human, and naga for, I guess, orc and human as well, because orc did do some naga tower pushes. But the tavern hero itself is still going to be the same cost, so it's not like it's more cost, it's just, you know, you're missing out on gold if you had just gone an altar hero, I guess. It's probably fine. I don't know. It's kind of whatever. I don't really know how this change got recommended, but I'm sure it's kind of just whatever. I don't think this is the type of change that breaks the game. So whatever. This change, however, is big. Reverted the Headhunter gold change. So the previous change was up the gold and up the wood. So it used to be 140 to up to 160 and 20 wood up to 30 wood. Now it's just 20 wood up to 30 wood, which means to me Headhunters will still be used just as much, especially in builds that might already be trying to get extra wood. Like if they're building an extra peon because they're going to expand or tower push at some point, like they're planning on that to begin with. You know, they might build an extra peon, they can get reinforced in towers with that, and this only having a wood cost increase makes the Headhunters pretty strong, because there was no other Headhunter nerfs, right? Yeah, it was just cost. So the Headhunter nerf being only 10 wood more and that's it is pretty small compared to what people wanted Headhunters get nerfed by, I believe. Yeah, Jats is back. He's gonna already be building that extra peon anyways for his tower push. So he's gonna have the wood anyways. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I'd say the only thing that changes now is maybe your second or third Headhunter might be delayed if you need that wood for the tech rather than that extra 10 wood or 20 wood that's for the Headhunter or whatever. Blade Master mirror images damage. So it originally had no damage, then they put it to 10 and now they put it to 25. I'm unsure of why they gave it damage to begin with, but 25 is probably pushing on the edge of too strong at this point, but we'll see. So the thing is, this also apparently procs on crits, I've heard. So the crits actually work for the illusions. Normally crits were just, you know, something that the illusions do, but they do 0 damage, of course, because illusions don't deal damage. But with this proccing on crits, if you actually have a high level crit, this could be a significant amount of damage, especially if you have multiple illusions. I think this is unneeded, but if they are going to put it in, you can just keep it with the 10, or make it not have crit or something. I don't know. I feel like it's just unneeded. The fact that it's already used, particularly against Elf, and I've maybe seen a couple people try it against Human, not really at pro level, but you know, I don't know. I think they could have just instead made it slightly cheaper mana, like -5 more mana, -10 mana. I don't know. 10 mana might be too much. Liquid Fire no longer preventing repair, but reduces repair rate by 75. I think that's probably fine. I don't think it's just kind of whatever. It's hardly used to begin with, and you still get it reducing attack speed, I believe, of towers and stuff, and all the damage is there. It's just that it can be repaired, but the repair is severely hindered anyways. So I think this mostly targets preventing main buildings, your main town hall, from getting destroyed. But everything else is still going to die fast enough that this won't matter. You won't be able to really repair it, right? But the main town halls can actually, you know, get some sort of minimal repair to potentially survive. I think that's fine. Great Hall build time reduced. Okay. This might be fine. 15 seconds is pretty significant. It's still, I believe, the longest build time, unless the human one has a longer build time. Except humans can power build to make it quicker. I'm not actually sure what the human build time is if they only had one peasant, but it is still a long time. But that 15 seconds is pretty significant. And then Blade Storm cooldown reduced to 120. So Orc gets a lot of buffs overall, both direct buffs and indirect buffs from other races getting nerfs. So I think Orc's in an alright spot. Yeah. And then Human. Okay, so tanks will keep their original damage now, but they get 1 armor and switch from fortified to medium. They were considering heavy, but now they're considering medium. I mean, I still think you won't really see the siege engines. I'm not actually sure if this is like, I don't know. I don't know how exactly this is going to function in real play. But it's interesting. Theoretically, and it still has its barrage buff as well, which was, what is it? 2 extra barrage damage, and it can attack units still. So it seems like something that would more affect big team play, you know, 3v3, 4v4. Because now you can include these siege engines in your army to do things like barrage. But they can also attack ground if there's no air nearby. The ground attack should be somewhat negligible for a lot of units because it's siege damage, but The fact that it can, now attack ground is big, right? 0 damage up to 44 siege is a big difference. So I don't know. I don't think it'll necessarily get play, but there could be some niche uses, especially because it's still, even if with medium armor, it still should be somewhat tanky, especially with so many races playing a lot of piercing damage. It's still mechanical, and it gets 1 armor, so there might be some niche uses, but it's probably more a 3v3 or 4v4 thing where you might see people trying it. I don't know if it'll be good though. I don't really care because I think it generally won't be used in solo too much. We'll see. As for whether it's a good change or bad change, it might be a good change to not have fortified armor. Fortified armor unit is pretty annoying. I think it's like the only fortified armor unit. So having to build a siege damage unit just to take care of it is pretty annoying, but yeah. And I think the problem is when you build a siege damage unit to take care of a siege engine, your siege unit is generally a lot more vulnerable because your siege unit is like heavy armor and lower health and so on, right? And has to sit in your base. Whereas the siege engine, when it had fortified, could just go around. But that's kind of how it was supposed to function. So I don't know. I don't know if this is actually a good change. It might have been better to leave siege engines untouched. Breaker armor 2 to 3. Humba. Humba. That's all that needs to be said. Okay. Anyways. I personally am not a fan of breakers getting buffed. They already have one of the most insane kits in the game in terms of like abilities. But they did originally have, this armor in a previous patch, so maybe there's still ways to deal with it. But they do have, the other nerf that should help some races with control magic move to tier 3 from tier 2. So they are getting nerfed in a different way, which allows things like wolves and treants to have some value, and wolves and treants do have normal damage and can be good against the breakers before tier 3. Human having a lot of tier 2 focus currently, so maybe that is a way to still combat that somewhat. But of course, they do still have feedback, magic immunity, and spell steal. So delete breakers, please. Okay. Blood Mage, Siphon Mana, reverted. So they were going to nerf it, now they reverted it, so it's normal, but they still have the other nerf being Drain Rate. Level 1 Drain Rate's the same. Level 2 and 3 are slightly nerfed. The level 3 nerf is very negligible, I think, because if you're like this much mana drain is already really high. So this one is the important one, and it's something, but I've seen some heroes, get one spell off and then one siphon is enough to just get rid of the rest of their mana, and that's it. You're done with your job. And I don't know if the 5 mana reduction here changes that. And even if it does, maybe it means instead of 0 mana, they have 20 mana, something like that. So I don't know. I don't know how big of a change that is. Yo, Reaver, thanks for the raid. We are looking at the notes right now, and currently at the start of pretty much everything. We looked at Orc a little, but we're on Human now. I personally liked this change more to happen to Siphon because I like Siphon to have a cost incurred if you're going to use it, whereas generally with this 10 mana cost, you just kind of cast it and you already get your mana back. There's no real punish to it. But, you know, the other change by itself is probably fine. It's not like Blood Mage is seen frequently to begin with. So it's fine. Blacksmith cost. They were testing moving it from 60 to 50 and now 60 to 40. That is starting to get more significant now. 20 lumber can make a big deal, especially especially when you're expanding. So if you expand, oftentimes you're actually making a blacksmith to block off your expo a bit. So if you have 20 less lumber cost there, you can get the blacksmith sooner. Which blocks off your expo sooner, makes your towers and peasants safer. And that could actually be pretty significant. In the end, it's just 20 wood, but it's the fact that you can get certain, or that you can potentially make it quicker, you know, which could help defending. So it might be relevant in certain cases. It might be nothing in other cases, though. Like, you know, sometimes 20 lumber doesn't mean anything, right? But there's definitely some cases, particularly with expansion play, where I think this could matter. And yeah, I don't know if it's good or bad, but okay. I'd like to see Hunter's Hall also with the lower wood cost, but you know, especially with Ultra Vision move to tier 2. But yeah, it's something. Holy Light will have no change now. It was originally 5, now they put it back to 5. I think that's fine. Holy Light's already lower cooldown and less mana than Coil. Coil can do damage to more races, which is probably why it's higher cost. But I think Holy Light at 5 seconds is still a good spell, right? It's just that Paladin isn't really a first or second hero. That's why we don't see Paladin too often. It's not really because his skills are bad. It's just he doesn't function well as a first pick hero, and as a second pick hero, you usually want damage rather than survivability. So I think it's more just Paladin doesn't fit the role rather than his skills necessarily being bad. Animal war training no longer at castle is interesting because it means you can either get animal war training on tier 2 while you're teching to tier 3 against undead, and that allows you to have it already ready for knights before you even have the ability to produce knights. So effectively, this can allow you, assuming you have the resources in excess, this can allow you to have an extra knight out against undead while having, or either an extra knight out or an extra health boost on the knights rather than not having this at all if you have to wait. So could be relevant against undead. And also it can help with Dragonhawks, and we have seen recently some Dragonhawks against Orc, Mountain King expansion Dragonhawks, and then of course in the past against Elf, pretty much same thing, Mountain King expansion Dragonhawks. So it could be relevant, and I think for Dragonhawks this is perfectly fine. Like, Dragonhawks are an underused unit to begin with, so if this makes them better, I guess go for it. It's probably good. Yeah, we'll see how it affects against undead. maybe the knights when they first come out will be a little too strong now against undead. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how much this will affect that, because it is a substantial health buff, right? Isn't that you can get from this? It's like 125 health or 150. So having that already completed and researched during tier 2 when you have nothing else to produce from your barracks because you've already gone through your footmen could be pretty relevant, I would think. But I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think this could be a good change overall, but we'll see how it affects the knight gameplay. It is still, of course, a high wood cost, and sometimes I've seen humans still struggling with wood cost against undead anyways, so they might not even necessarily be able to afford it, right? And then we got Staff of Sanctuary and Orb of Fire buffs. Staff of Sanctuary down to 200 is pretty cheap. Like that's now starting to be a pretty strong staff, I would think. I'm pretty sure humans already think staff is strong when you can actually afford it. You just normally can't afford it, or like you don't have time to get it, right? So maybe this puts it over the top and it becomes insanely powerful. The thing is, it's mostly for heroes and knights, right? Or like griffins. You want like high value targets generally with this. I don't know if this is needed, or if they could have gone to 225 instead. I'm not sure how to judge this exactly. All I know is the times when human have had lots of staffs against me, or Steves, it has felt pretty powerful. So if they're able to get them 50 gold cheaper on each one, maybe that's kind of sketchy. I don't know, but maybe it's needed. I think it's mostly the first staff where, though, right? Like once you get that first staff, if you can afford it, it's good. I don't know if I'm wording that properly or saying that properly. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I don't know how to judge it exactly yet, but I don't think it necessarily needed to be reduced to this much, because the staff's definitely not bad to begin with. Orb of Fire damage 7 to 10 is probably fine, but it really only affects gameplay against undead. We'll see if humans try to mix in more orbs just because it's plus 10 damage, but 300 gold for 10 damage is not exactly cheap. So, like, you can already buy a 9 damage claw from a market for 300 gold, right? It's whatever. It just mostly makes humans slightly stronger against undead, which might be fine if humans still considered weak against undead. But undead is getting a lot of nerfs here. So human getting buffs, undead getting nerfs. How much is too much human buffs, right? I guess that's the hard thing to tell when there's so many changes at the same time. But this might be fine, especially because it's tier 3 and already kind of underused as far as orbs go. Night Elf. So there's very little changes here, but there was previously a bunch of changes. So Talons do piercing. Immolation was originally mana cost reduced, tick rate doubled, takes half as much time. Yeah. This Druid of the Talon crow form, I feel like doesn't change anything except talons against gyros and like talons against destroyers. The fact that talons can now hit destroyers is kind of crazy, because if you can theoretically get talons to beat destroyers and then just morph the talons back to, you know, out of crow form, now you can cyclone them and they don't have destroyers. So it's kind of problematic to do to have piercing damage against to have piercing damage on crows to begin with, but maybe this damage nerf is relevant enough because it is -8 damage. Repair rate of Orb of Fire, I mean? Or just repair rate in general? I'm not sure which part you're talking about. Or if I looked away too. Yeah, on talons, I don't know if the talon changes are good or not. They are underused. You know, talons aren't really seen like anywhere. But they're kind of in a weird spot, right? Like casters in general just have a tough time against breakers and destroyers. And even dryads to some extent. But not necessarily dryads, but sometimes against dryads. So I don't know. I don't know if this is the right way to go about it. But from 34, this is technically going from 34 magic damage previously to 26 piercing. And I don't know if that's... It might be fine. It's just kind of in a weird spot because Night Elf already has hippos, right? You already have hippo riders. Or I mean, just hippogriffs. You already have hippogriffs to do anti-air, so it's kind of in a weird spot. The benefit of being able to use talons should be its spells, right? Fairy Fire and maybe Cyclone. Fairy Fire being able to be cast in crow form. So as long as this is less effective straight up damage than hippos, then I guess it's fine. So I don't know. 26 is probably a fine number if they're going to do it to piercing damage. But I do think it needs to still be tested against destroyer play. Particularly if elf goes like, you know, fairies and stuff and like some talon mix as well. Because you don't really want elf to wipe the destroyers with talons in crow form and then morph all the destroyers, or morph all the talons back to normal talon form so that they can cyclone everything. Because you don't want undead to be stuck in cyclone and not being able to dispel it because their dispeller also loses to the caster. And that's the real problem with putting piercing on talons. So I don't know if putting piercing on talons is the correct play. It might have been better to leave talons as magic damage and instead buff this damage. That might have been better. I don't know. Immolation. So they put it back down to the original numbers, but they still have twice the tick rate and lower mana cost. So this is still really powerful and should be too powerful, I would think, as is. I'm not sure if they're just missing the fact that this tick rate here effectively doubles the damage because it's ticking every half a second instead of every second. But yeah, personally I think this could be, instead of 10, 15, 20, keep the reduced mana cost, keep the tick rate, And I think it could be somewhere like 6, 10, 14 or 6, 12, 18, somewhere in that range. I think 6, 10, 14 would probably be fine. The question is, how good is Immolation on level 2 Immolation? Because that could change things. Level 3 Immolation is kind of whatever. Because the thing is, even if it's strong, there's a lot of other AoE spells that are also strong with bigger AoE, instant, more range, and ends up being less mana cost because this one's essentially channeled in a way because it, you know, keeps draining mana. So the level 3 Immolation still being strong is negligible, right? If someone drops in a peasant line with a panda or a warden, that's still going to kill the peasants quicker than an Immolation that has, let's say, 18 tick, so 36 DPS. The panda or warden's still going to kill it quicker, so I don't think it's necessarily a problem to have that one as strong as it is. But the level 2 one is the one that matters, because elf could do some strong pushes before human has established themselves, assuming the human still expands against elf. And that's why maybe something like 6, 10, 14 might be the play for damage. Is it still okay to play undead if you're already bad with undead? No. Undead is dead. This is no longer a race. This is a 3-race game now. They added a new race called human, and they deleted undead. So you are now a human player because that is the new race. But yeah, we'll talk about undead now. So undead essentially gets only nerfs, I believe, apart from animate dead is buffed, technically. They made it like undispellable, but it can be damaged. But being damaged is probably better than not being targeted because you actually want it to soak up damage usually. And then Disease Cloud can be there too. But Disease Cloud slight nerf, that's fine. Yeah. But this should have, I think statues give more experience now, and their mana restore is reduced. I think they can actually revert the experience if they're going to do this. If they're going to touch the mana like this, get it? Spirit touch? Okay, anyways. If they're going to touch the mana like this to actually nerf the mana restore of statues, they actually don't need to make statues give more XP, because that's mostly going to buff Orc even further, which I wouldn't say Orc's necessarily in a bad spot against undead to begin with. So as much as I think it's weird that statues only give 40 XP rather than 60, I think they could actually keep it like that if they're going to nerf this like this. Haunted Goldmine build time, 20 seconds is pretty significant. I was mentioning for Orc, 15 seconds lower is pretty significant, but this is also significant. And this is also not necessarily what I would have wanted. I do think this might be a fine change, especially because I don't know. I just feel like this might be a fine change for Haunted Goldmine. But I think the better change would have been to do something with Nerubian Towers. Nerubian Tower needs like a much shorter duration slow, especially on heroes at least. Yeah, or something changed about it. You know, it could have shorter range. It could have, you know, lower duration slow. It could be it could be something with even just less damage. So it's already low damage, but it could be even less damage. So it's mostly just a slow tower then, rather than like a damage tower. Because it does have like, what, 10 to 12 normal or something? Which isn't necessarily bad against certain medium armor units. And there are a lot of medium armor. But I think touching Nerubian would have been better than this. But touching at least one, or, you know, affecting one of them, you know, changing this is better than nothing, because undead expansions are the type of thing where if they get them up, are oftentimes game winning. Like a lot of races find it where if undead gets their expansion up and there was no delay to it or no tier 2 timing push against it to just break it before it's paid off, that you just kind of lose. So it's something. I do think Nerubians being changed would have been better though, and then you could even put this back to 100. Nova nerf. I'm not sure if this is the right change for Nova nerf. I don't hate it though. It still has the 100 damage single target on top of this AoE. So level 1 Nova does 5 less AoE, you know, 5 less single targets. It's whatever, but it does start getting significant at the high levels. But Nova is, I believe, uncapped, right? So big groups of units still, you know, take lots of damage overall. But I think the big thing here is it still has a long duration slow. Max level Nova is like 8-second slow on units and 4-second on heroes, I believe. And has like 8-second cooldown, as far as I know. So maybe instead of damage, they could have touched the slow duration and made that lower. That might have been better. But I do think Nova was one of the AoE skills that, you know, just hadn't been touched, whereas all the other AoE skills have, right? You know, you got Stomp got nerfed at some point, Breath of Fire got nerfed, but also buffed and then nerfed and whatever. Fan might have got nerfed, I can't remember. Clap got nerfed. You know, a lot of AoE spells got nerfed, but Nova really stayed kind of the same as far as I know, and it was always pretty strong. There's another update? What do you mean? Oh, so some of these numbers are different? I think this is the only one I've noticed that's different though. Or unless this was 20, I think this was 26 before. Yeah. If the previous nerf was more than this, then the previous nerf might have been too much, potentially. Because it is Undead's current AoE spell, right? Like they currently don't rely on Impale or Carrion. This is their AoE spell. So keeping the AoE somewhat strong is good. But I think they could have instead, maybe they could have reduced the single target damage and the slow on Nova and kept the AoE good. That might have been a better change. To be honest, I don't know what everyone else thinks, but I think maybe what if they kept this the same, which is still really strong AoE, but what if they nerfed the single target and the slow duration? I don't know. I think that would be more of my choices. I would reduce the single target and the slow duration instead of the AoE damage, because it has like a plus 100 single target. Overall, Undead just gets a lot of nerfs. I'm not sure if they really get buffs at all. Let's see. Yeah, is like Animate Dead is probably buffed, and then everything else is a nerf. So I think Undead, how to put it? I think Undead is getting kind of crippled at a lot of levels of play from this, but they might be fine changes at top level play. Because at top level play, Undead is pretty powerful. I just feel at lower level plays, you are losing a lot of different aspects that are strong. You're losing the Lich, you're losing the Haunted Goldmine, you're losing the mana from Statue, you're losing some of the anti-magic shield power, the movement speed, aura. But there are strategies where these changes don't actually matter too much for Undead. Like the Garg strategies, for instance. Like those will still be kind of strong. The Haunted Goldmine change matters for that. Because you do want to expand with Gargs, but yeah, those sort of strategies might see more play again, especially against like Elf with Gargs, sometimes human Garg with Gargs. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is too much, especially with this change as well. Like if this wasn't changed, Undead could still rely on heroes just having tons of mana and killing everything, but this might actually affect heroes quite a bit, having the less regen. We'll see. And then they fixed things that were buggy, but I think they have more things that are buggy on the PTR as well. So, yeah. And then these are the old changes. So let's see if there are any to comment on. There's this Tavern Revive 5%, which combined with or not combined with, but on top of having like altar heroes be cheaper, now it's like everything from the tavern feels a lot worse, right? Like tavern heroes now cost 25 more gold, 35 more wood to begin with. And if you want to revive from the tavern rather than from your altar, it's also 5% higher than before. So they just don't want people to use the tavern, I guess. Other important things to mention, that one breaker armor, there's the control magic nerf, so breakers are getting a buff but also a nerf, which okay. Okay. I prefer them not to get the buff at all, but whatever. Peasants did get the buff here for 10 health. I actually wondered, what if you buffed peasants even slightly further? What if peasants had like 245 health, but militia form had like less armor? So peasants are still like peasants get buffed when they're in peasant form, but like militia form has less armor, so that they aren't as powerful. Would that be a change humans want? Would that be a good change? Because right now militia gets like 4 armor, I believe, once they take militia form. So what if that was like 3 armor, and instead the HP was 245 or something? Like you keep buffing this HP. It would be better for your expansion, where your expansion doesn't have militia to begin with. but it would be worse for your main maybe in some cases where you want your militia to be able to tank more. It'd be better against spells though, but worse in, you know. I think that's a thing that could be looked at. What if peasant HP got even more health, but like armor on militia was reduced? Yes, let's tilt the warden players. Oh yeah, and this change, the mortar HP increase, is this actually needed? Is 20 HP more on them needed? Because the thing with mortars is they're not actually mechanical like other siege, so they can already be healed from heal scroll, healed from priest, healed from holy light. Do they really need a higher health pool as well? So I feel like this change might be kind of out of place, especially when humans getting all these other buffs now anyways. Do they really need this as well? So personally, I don't see, like, when they first announced this, I was like, okay, this is fine. But now that they're announcing all these other buffs for human, I'm like, I feel like this is one that doesn't need to be there. Then, you know, you're getting higher health peasants. You're getting your breaker armor back. You're getting blacksmith 20 cost reduced. War training at tier 2 for hawks or preemptive before knights. You're getting your orb and staff better. You know, if you're getting all of those, maybe they don't need this 20 health on mortars anyways. I don't know. Yeah, I personally don't think the staff should be cheaper, or if it is cheaper, it should be a lot less cheaper. So it should be like at least 225 or 235 or something. You know, it could be lower than 250, but I don't think it should be much lower, if at all, because it is a pretty strong staff. The fact that it can heal the unit, you know, you don't have to invest in heals somewhere. You know, you aren't buying potions or using moon wells to heal it up. It just heals by itself. But it does take some time. I think another way they could have done it, rather than reducing the cost of staff, maybe make it heal quicker. You know, buff the heal rate so that finishes quicker, the unit gets back into the fight quicker. That also might have been a better way. You know, make them still have to invest in the staff, but that the staff pays off quicker in a way because it's healing quicker and stuff. I don't know. I think that could have been better too. Yeah, headhunters with this, like I said, the old change. You know, they're essentially only 10 wood more. This gold cost is gone now, so yeah. Oh, and something I mentioned wrongly before. I thought this was like heal rate, but it's actually just the ward's HP, I believe, which only affects when like an acolyte or a peon or, you know, peasant hits it. So this is actually just pointless. Which doctors need to change like heal wards at adept training if they want heal wards to get used? Maybe even, you know, heal wards with adept training only, but you could make the heal rate, whatever it is, slightly lower or something. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's all to talk about. I did talk about these in the previous notes. What else was relevant? Orc gets a lot of buffs overall against Elf. You know, tier 2 Ultra Vision, Blade Master Mirror Image buff, Grunt buff, because the Grunt buff is still here, and the Mirror Image buff as well. Headhunters were already not too common against Elf, and even when they are used against Elf, the Orc's generally going to get extra wood to begin with because they're going to tower push or something anyways. So this is maybe negligible. Whereas Entangle got nerfed. So Orc overall more buff. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say the big things for this current patch, decide if this crow being piercing is meaningful to begin with. Like, I don't know if this ruins it against destroyers, even though they did lower the damage. It might be better, like I said, just to keep it magic damage and buff the damage instead of making it piercing and lowering the damage. Because crows being able to potentially beat destroyers is bad design. Because destroyers are anti-caster and crows are highly a caster unit because they can even cast fairy fire while in crow form. And you already have hippos for anti-air. So I don't necessarily like this. And then Immolation, a little too strong still as is because of the tick rate. I think this could have stayed, but whatever. There's still a siphon nerf at level 2 and 3 siphon. I personally wouldn't like to see breaker armor, but I know the humans have all just reinstalled their Warcraft. They're like, oh my god, guys, breakers are back. We're in business. So, you know, we just increased the population of Warcraft from like 30 people to 40 people. So maybe this is fine for that. Orc overall might be too strong from all these buffs because Orc's not even necessarily doing bad at pro level, right? Like Lin and Focus generally do pretty good, and Soin as well. So them getting all these buffs and Undead's getting nerfs, Elf's getting mostly nerfs, depending on how Immolation ends up at the end. It could be pretty strong for Orc. The question is, how does Orc versus Human end up? Because both of them actually ended up getting buffs, but the Orc buffs, apart from the 50 health grunts, might not actually apply against Human. This matters against Human though, the 15-second build time. Yeah, we'll see how it ends up. I think Undeads at lower MMR levels and middle MMR levels, and yeah, possibly like up to 2k MMR even, might struggle a bit from this. But if you're actually one of the Undeads that already relied heavily on like Garg play and hit and runs and stuff like that, maybe it doesn't matter as much. Because in those games, you're oftentimes getting an advantage and never having to actually take a fight that is close to begin with. So this might not actually matter too much for those, apart from the Haunted Goldvine build time. And they don't even build statues in some of those, right? Because they're just massing Gargs. They're like, I don't even want to build a slaughter. Like first elf and stuff, right? So I don't know Undead state. At top play, these changes might be fine for Undead, but Undead is pretty tough to play at lower levels. So these nerfs are potentially rough for them. And Nerubians are still something that could be looked at instead of some of these changes. Like you could revert this in Rubian. What else? What else? Anything else to say? Anything else to point out? My gut feeling, assuming Immolation gets nerfed again, or nerfed from this proposed buff, it could be something like Orc strongest, and then maybe Elf Human to tied for like second, and then Undead lower. But Undead maybe still, you know, Undead might still be tied for second at like high level play because they don't necessarily need those. But at low level play, it's definitely like the weakest. Yeah. Yeah, I would say this is kind of potentially in order. You know, you got orc at the top. I think the orc. I think orc benefits the most from this. Orc already makes alter heroes, right? So they're getting an extra 25, maybe 50 gold here. The headhunter change, whatever. It's only wood cost now. They don't even have the gold cost. Mirror image buff, Bat Rider, whatever, doesn't matter. Build time reduced for expo, so they can expo better. Grunts get 50 HP buff. The only real nerf is the movement speed aura, which could be impactful, particularly against human. But I don't know if, you know, this makes a huge difference because they already got speed scrolls anyways for move speed. So yeah, I think orc will be strong. Patch orcs, anyone? Patch humans? Question mark. Anyways, I think that's my analysis. Hopefully you guys enjoyed some of my thoughts and rediscussion over this, especially if you saw my previous discussion on the previous notes. Yeah. But I would like to see Immolation be usable. If it ends up being reverted completely, like if it's only the tick rate's better, but the DPS, like the actual DPS stays equal as it was before, and then the mana reduced, I don't think I would use it because mana burn is too crucial. You know, like maybe you'd use it in fringe scenarios with only level 1 immolation, just like you do now on difficult creep camps against a human that's expanding in a difficult creep camp. But I'd like to see it be actually used where it can do something, especially if Keeper is nerfed with its entangle. So yeah.